Islamic culture would probably not have been so deep-seated in Spain had it not been for the establishment of the Western Caliphate, which provided it with a spiritual as well as a political center. The derivation of the word caliphate is Arabic, from khalifa, meaning representative, and in this context it designates the successor to the prophet, not in the prophetic sense, but simply the royal office. Thus, the caliph is not a high priest or a pope, at least not in the sense of the caliphate of Sunni Islam, and his role is more that of the emperor in the medieval Holy Roman Empire, except that in Islam there is no distinction between religious law and secular law, and consequently no separation between church and state. The caliph is the ritual leader, imam of the Islamic community, the trustee of the law handed down to him, the highest military leader, and the commander of the faithful. When Spain was conquered by an army of Berbers and Arabs at the beginning of the 8th century, it remained for a while a remote, outlying province of the great empire, which the ruling Umayyad caliphs had just extended as far as Samarkand. In the mid-8th century, the Abbasids took the place of the Umayyads, and Baghdad succeeded Damascus as a political center. In 756, one of the last surviving Umayyad princes escaped to Andalusia and there established a new principality independent of Baghdad. This prince, Abd ar-Rahman, was faced with the choice either of spending the rest of his life in flight, perpetually in danger of being handed over to the Abbasids, or to found his own empire, sword in hand. He himself told the story of how, when he fled from the Abbasid bailiffs in the east, he reached the Euphrates, threw himself in, and swam across. His younger brother, terrified by the water, turned back and was beheaded. Eventually, Abd ar-Rahman rallied a number of former Umayyad supporters and raised an army which went straight for Seville, displacing the existing princes in the Spanish province. The dynasty founded on this day was later to become the Western Caliphate that ruled from Cordoba. In the empire, the ruler assumed office by entering into an alliance with his subjects, whereby he undertook to observe the divine law and the subjects pledged themselves to obedience. In the tradition of the alliance between the prophet and his followers, this bond was sealed by a joining of hands between the ruler and his ministers at the uppermost level, the tribal chiefs and the highest judges, and then between these and their followers from rank to rank, down as far as the humblest subjects. Nevertheless, a symbolic act such as this imposed certain responsibilities. If the ruler did not discharge his duty, then his subjects ceased to regard their duty as binding. Once installed, the ruler formed the peak, as it were, of a pyramid in which all power flowed downwards. The ruler could act as head of state, as commander of the army, or as judge, but in fact he conferred his mandatory powers on two of the highest officials, the prime minister and the supreme judge. Within the caliphate, these were the chancellor or hajib and the first judge of the city of Cordoba. The chancellor had both the administration and the army under him. He advised the council of ministers and had the first secretary, Khatib, as an assistant. The administration itself was divided into state chancellery, finance, and royal household. As far as taxes were concerned, every Muslim was bound to pay an alms tax once a year, which the ruler was permitted to draw upon for use in the Holy War. In addition to this, there were the taxes on property, personal or poll tax, which were graded according to religion and rank, and the various tributes laid down in agreements with non-Muslim vassals. Then there were estates, whose revenues supported the royal families, and also the market and excise taxes, which the ruler had added to cover special expenses, for his personal policy required him to be at all times in a position to distribute lavish gifts. For this purpose, there were workshops attached to his household, where craftsmen produced precious silk brocades for festive garments, gold work, and ivory carvings. The religion set the limits of power of the ruler, which he could not transgress without losing the respect of his people. thereby destroying the foundation of authority. These limits were all the more immovable, since the Islamic religion not only regulates the conduct of the individual, but also extends to the public aspects of community life. The state could never be separated from religion. On the other hand, the ruler was obliged to impose restrictions on himself by naming as supreme judge a man known both for his virtue and his learning, one whom the people respected and trusted to uphold justice in the land, and who was allowed to contradict the ruler. The entire social order depended far more on individual persons than on organizations. Just as the prime minister or chancellor, who in a sense was the counterpart of the supreme judge, administered the funds of the Islamic religious community that were kept in the Great Mosque. These funds stemmed from religious foundations and from properties bequeathed by deceased persons, and were used for the upkeep of these same properties, consisting largely of mosques, hospitals, schools, baths, fountains, and bridges. In emergencies, any surplus could be used for the defense of the Islamic community. Thus, there was a whole empire of the deceased serving the living, which was not subject to the arbitrary power of the ruler. A modern historian has observed that the Moorish culture of the 9th and 10th century, despite its advanced level of development, bears no trace of a communal order produced by the people, unlike the Christian Latin culture of the Middle Ages. Life in Moorish Spain was completely under the domination of the officials of the absolute ruler and of the rigid foundations bequeathed by the dead, which were likewise inimical to progress. Yet the inflexibility of these same institutions was not considered oppressive, but were regarded as a protection and a safeguard. The Islamic city thereby acquired a semi-monastic character, which, incidentally, was further emphasized by the way that all dwellings faced away from the streets, opening inwards to an interior courtyard. Family life was withdrawn to escape public prying in the same way that the estates bequeathed by the deceased eluded interference from the state. This is characteristic of the Islamic State in its purest form. Communal life was ordered within certain, firmly established forms, which cannot be altered by the individual. But this is only the outer layer of life, not its substance, which enfolds inside this and is developed inwardly.